Hello, brothers and sisters. This is the Treetop Flyer coming back at you again with now our third in a series of podcasts in these very critical and challenging times with my friend from the Truth Ark, www.truthark.org. Look them up. They're doing wonderful things. Now, I want to mention them and compliment them a little. These are young cats, okay? And in the last year or two, with the circumstances that are going down, they have awakened to what's happening. And that's really important because we need to reach out to the young people. They're the future. I care about the future. And so many of them, I find, do not understand what's happening today, and they don't understand some of the things I'm going to talk about today. But these guys have woken up, and they're on it, and they're getting the message out to you, and they're doing a lot of research, and they understand what's happening. So we're going to talk about a number of things today, and we're going to build on each of the previous two podcasts that we did. And in those, I went back a little bit in history to show how we keep repeating the same mistakes in history, and we're not learning from them. And then I went back even further to show how very diabolical plots and plans and agendas have been laid out going all the way back into the 18th century, even previous to the formation of this country. Now that's really important to understand so that you'll be able to fix in your mind that what is happening today has been laid out and planned for a very long period of time. They're boiling the frog slowly, turning the heat up, conditioning the people to accept totalitarian systems of government. Now today, we happen to be on location in a uniquely American tradition. We're at a gun show. I love gun shows. Why do I love gun shows? Because we're the last country in the world with a Second Amendment to keep and bear arms. And that's a really amazing thing. And not only that, but gun shows are wonderful people. You can come and have amazing conversations. You can come and find people who understand what's going on in the world. You can find people who understand and protect the Constitution of the United States and the Bill of Rights contained. We're going to talk about that specifically today. And they understand freedom, and they understand what's going on in this country. Not only that, but you can come here and you can get supplies for everything related to outdoor living, backpacking, mountain climbing, preparedness, self-sufficient living, all those things that I've done all my life and taught all my life, all my adult life. So this is a wonderful example of private, small entrepreneur capitalism, which is completely under attack today as well. So all those things make a gun show a perfect environment to talk about what we're going to talk about today. And they're wonderful things, and they're very uniquely American, and you don't see this happening in lots of other places. Now, as I stated earlier, I feel we're in an urgent and literally an emergency situation because we are now in an occupied country. This country has been taken over slowly but surely by a very totalitarian system and agenda. They want to eliminate all of our rights contained in the Bill of Rights, not just the Second Amendment, but all of them. So it's very important to get this message out now because uncountable acts of war are being done against us. I could list them, I could go for a long list, but I'll talk about a few. But before I say that, I want to say I taught self-defense classes as a martial artist for many years. And when I had particularly women's self-defense classes, I always taught them, if you're under attack, I mean real violent attack, you can't keep just defending. Sooner or later, you're going to tire or your defense may fail. At some point, you must turn your defense into an offense. You have to stop the violence or the assault or the attack upon you. Otherwise, you're going to become a victim and a statistic. And that's very much the situation we're in this country today, is we are under attack in uncountable ways. Now, the media, social media, everything in mainstream media and government would like you to believe that all that is not true. And there's a term they've used to condition your mind, to hypnotize you, and to make you stop thinking and observing what's really going on. We're not going to use that word. It starts with a C-O-N, and it has a compound word that they've added theories onto the end of it, and now they've added debunked in front of it. We're not going to use that term. You know why I'm not going to use that term? Because that's how they've programmed you and hypnotized you. Now, in documentaries and podcasts I made many years ago predicting all these current events, I gave people a way to break free of that program by giving them an acronym. And the acronym I came up with to replace the programming the media uses on those terms is IMCA. I, period, M, period, C, period, A, period. And what that stands for is intentionally manipulated covert agendas. Because that's what we have happening, is intentionally manipulated covert agendas. Every time you hear them use that other term, they're driving wedges into your brain. They're driving wedges into your critical thinking. They're driving wedges into your analytical ability to see the truth, because they don't want you to know the truth. Because if you knew the truth, you would rise up and do something about it. And in the founding of this country, they understood that. And that's why they gave us the Second Amendment. It wasn't about duck hunting, and it wasn't just about hunting for survival for food. Those are also important parts included. But the Second Amendment, the right to keep and bear arms, was for defense. Personal defense against violence and collective defense against tyrannical government, which is what we have happening now. And it's not just tyrannical, it's gone full-blown into complete totalitarianism. Now, I like to use the word totalitarianism because they've also programmed you to think communism failed with the former Soviet Union and that all collapsed. The Soviet Union did not just collapse. It was sabotaged and wrecked intentionally because it had served its purpose relating to those agendas that I told you in the last podcast that go back all the way to 1773. Yes, 1773. They want you to believe communism failed and disappeared with the collapse of the former Soviet Union. It was restructured. It was sabotaged and restructured. It wasn't working very efficiently, that's a fact. But why is that important? Because the term you hear today that they're also programming you with is the Great Reset. Well, what is the Great Reset? Why are they doing it now? Why are they forcing it upon the people of the world instead of it being a democratically chosen process? It's very clear the people of the world do not want the Great Reset. It's engineered. And isn't it interesting that it's come married with a global pandemic? And yes, I'm going to call it a pandemic because these things can't happen without planning, intention, and a purpose. And they've married the global pandemic with the Great Reset with the rigged elections to create the scenario of problem, reaction, solution to force everybody globally into a global totalitarian system. The people of the world do not want that. It's very clear. In India, a month or so ago, they locked down the entire country with a general strike, 250 million people in the streets rebelling against a lot of these kinds of things. 250 million. How come we can't even get a few thousand here at the state capitol? How come when hundreds of thousands gathered in Washington, D.C., they manipulated that into a deadly insurrection when that wasn't what the intent of the people was at all? If they wanted to do an insurrection, it would have been very different. They don't want the people to rise up. They want to force this stuff little by little by little onto the people. We can't allow that because it is hidden in a global depopulation agenda. That is the intent. They've laid that out going back decades past and stated very clearly they're going to depopulate the world greatly. Well, how are they going to achieve that? They achieve that with all these acts of war that are happening on us right now that we're going to talk about, and why the founders of this country, the citizens as well, demanded we have a Bill of Rights added as amendments to the Constitution. Now, it's very important. I also want to say that originally in the Constitution, the Bill of Rights was not included. The delegates to the Constitutional Convention had already been infiltrated with many agents from the European financiers who already had their hooks in the new American creation, and in this continent full of resources, they saw it as simply another empire or the potential for more empire. And remember, the 18th century was the apex of colonial empire expansion, colonialism. The delegates in the original Constitution did not want a Bill of Rights included. The people demanded it. And that was the work of Mr. Thomas Jefferson. When he came back from Europe, they created the Bill of Rights and were able to get it added to the Constitution. And it wasn't until (1791) that they finally got the original 11 states to include the Bill of Rights. Now think about this. Besides the Declaration of Independence, the Bill of Rights is what is critical, because never before in history had anyone created a system of self-governance where they said, these are the rights we demand, and they do not come from the government we are creating. We are creating a self-government system, and we demand these rights, and the Constitution is the contract with the federal power to protect us from them overstepping our rights. That had never been done before. Now you need to think about that. And even more importantly, they said these rights do not come from the government, they come from our Creator. However you define that to mean, they defined it to mean our Creator. Not the government they were creating. And not only that, but they insisted we can't list all those rights we demand that come from our Creator, but here's the basic ones. We will put them down, we will include them in the Constitution that is a contract with the government, but we claim all the others that we haven't spoken about here. We claim those as well. And you can't take them away. I'm going to repeat that. You can't take them away because they come from our Creator. Now that had come down through a system of what was called natural law, then through the common law of Europe, and the common law came from Europe to America, and the original colonies were under the common law. And these were practices of human interaction and common laws of people dealing with people that they found had worked reasonably well for centuries. We were supposed to be founded on the common law. Look what we have today. Tens of thousands of statutory code laws that are overlaid, that's the key, they're overlaid on the foundation of natural law, common law, constitutional law, and the Bill of Rights. So you have this beautiful, pristine hardwood floor, and now you've overlaid it with ugly green shag carpeting like we had in the 60s. You remember that, 60s and 70s? If you don't remember that, it's because you're too young. We've overlaid it. The former still exists, but they force all these thousands and thousands of statutory code laws, and they've left it to the states, the legislators in the states, to create those laws and overlay it on the Constitution, and then create endless numbers of law enforcement personnel to enforce that statutory code. That in itself is an act of war against the people, because it's a slow and silent, ever-increasing oppressive system that's designed to fine you and imprison you and take your freedom and take your resources little by little by little. Again, boiling the frog slowly. A civil system of laws that does that, that's in contradiction to the supreme law of the land, which the Constitution is supposed to be, is a complete violation of the Bill of Rights and the Constitution. But they've gotten away with it. Instead of calling these unconstitutional laws and in violation of the supreme law of the land, they've allowed them to stay. And the oppression grows until it's become basically a totalitarian system. Now, the original states were sovereign countries, as I said before. And it's important that they were given the ability to make their own laws, that the people within the populations of those states, they were sovereign citizens, yeah, sovereign citizens. They were state citizens. They weren't under the dominion of the federal power until after what I call the Second American Civil War of 1861. The First American Civil War happened at the end of the 18th century and led to Thomas Jefferson running for president in 1803. The country was in near rebellion. It was in the kind of chaos and rebellion we're having right now. But they worked that out. They got through that period until the financiers came in again and rigged the Second American Civil War of 1861. So, I'm going to talk most importantly today about the First Amendment and the Second Amendment. The First Amendment, what we call the right to free speech, the right to assembly, the right to petition the grievances against government, whether it be local, state, or federal. The right to freely speak and choose your place of worship, your religion. That was number one. It wasn't originally number one. It originally was number three, but they removed the first two that they were trying to create in the Bill of Rights, and instead that became the First Amendment that we call free speech. Why am I talking about that now? Because the First Amendment is completely and totally under attack today. Mainstream media has seized the apparatus of communication, and I mean all mainstream media. They are hypnotizing the people, because when they constantly put information out, what you hear repetitively, constantly, is what is absorbed into the subconscious mind. That becomes the program you operate on. That is a type of hypnosis. If you don't believe that, go watch a good stage hypnotist and watch when they put somebody under hypnosis what they can make them do. It's quite astonishing. Go check it out. But that's what's happening to the larger population via mainstream media. They are conditioning and hypnotizing the people to make them accept more and more control, this complete totalitarian system, to make them surrender their rights, and then in some places simply seizing with power grabs to take them away. How can you explain the standing president of the United States being banned from social media, from being banned from media coverage, from being banned to communicate with the people of the United States? The standing president of the United States, both before he was elected, during his presidency, and certainly after the rigged elections. If they can do that to the standing president of the country, what can they do to you, and what are they doing to you? Right now, we're in the middle of this pandemic, and all the greatest medical science minds I know of that are speaking out against what's going on in this pandemic and this campaign are all under attack. They're all being censored. They're all being taken off of all forms of media. They're not being allowed to exercise their First Amendment rights because they don't want you to hear what these people have to say. They don't want you to question the safety of this program that's being forced upon you. And I do mean forced. Up till now, it's been mild levels of coercion. But the intention will be to increase the coercion until it's absolute force. You will not have a choice in this eventually. And that's being seen right now with the attempts to roll out vaccine passport. Now, I said that word. I'm not going to use that word anymore to describe this program, because that's not what it is at all. It's really something else. I'll get to that in a minute. But my point is, the First Amendment right to free speech is being destroyed in this country. If you don't have the First Amendment right to free speech, I can't come here and do what I'm doing right now. You can't assemble in your local city council, county council, state government, or federal government and petition your grievances when they have overstepped their authority, when they have broken their contract under the Constitution, when they are stepping upon your rights contained in the Bill of Rights. The people of this country should have risen up long ago. They're being pacified somehow. They're being hypnotized into inaction. They're being convinced continuously all of this is for our protection, when it is not for our protection. It is for our subjugation, it's for control over us, and it's now for a depopulation agenda. That's all been very clearly laid out. Go see the Georgia Guidestones. Go read what is on the Georgia Guidestones. I'm not making this stuff up. I couldn't make it up in my worst nightmares. It is all happening right now. During this pandemic, which, by the way, presidents cannot make law, governors cannot make law. They can issue mandates. They can make even executive orders. That's actually something different. Law can only be made properly by elected, duly elected legislators. You see this? Can't mask, don't ask. I'm not wearing a mask because they are useless and they are dangerous. In this state, the governor, who thinks he's a king, mandated that everyone has to do this. That criminal that's the head spokesperson for the CDC mandates from the CDC, which is just a bureaucracy, that everyone has to mask up. Those are mandates, they're not law. But they've slid this under public health protection. And they're trying to get away with it, but people are waking up to what it really is. If you can't speak up about this, they're going to crush us in every way. We cannot allow that to happen. They've also closed down churches and places of worship. If you're not free under the First Amendment to go to your place of worship and gather, I don't care what kind of emergency crisis they've engineered. That's the most important time for most people to gather at such a place. They have no right to shut that down under a false public health crisis that they have created. The First Amendment protects the right to gather, to exercise freedom of religion and freedom of speech. It's pretty important. Otherwise, there's no way to change the continued slide into totalitarian government. You can't speak up. What is left? When there are problems amongst people in society, you either talk about it and work it out, you work it out through a democratic process and voting, and if that doesn't work, what's left? Historically, what's been left is violence. I'm not advocating that. Don't let anybody try to twist my words and say I'm advocating that, but sometimes there is no other way. And they are pushing it to that point right now by continuous acts of war against it. Now, let's talk about the Second Amendment. The right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Infringe. What does that mean? They didn't say, well, they used the word infringe. That means you can't chew away at it and chip away at it little by little by little until you've rendered it meaningless. If they keep adding all these local ordinances, local statutes, state statutes, executive orders, they are essentially going to eradicate the Second Amendment rights. And then the people have no way to defend themselves against criminality, be it common civil criminality or criminality perpetrated upon them by the government at any level of government. It's about defense. That's why they included the part about a well-regulated militia. In those days, the well-regulated militia was a militia of the people. Now, the attorneys have gotten in there and attempted to twist that interpretation to mean, oh, that's the military or that's the National Guard. That wasn't what they demanded be included in the Second Amendment in the Bill of Rights. It was the right of the people to keep and bear arms, to defend themselves against anything that threatened their right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The right to defend myself is a primal right. Everything in nature has the right to defend itself and will. That includes us under natural law. You can't take it away because we didn't leave it to you to take it away. You didn't create these rights. They came from our Creator, a primordial right to self-defense. And that means the tools of the day. It doesn't mean we have to use 18th century muskets or bows and arrows or sticks and stones. It means the implements of the technology of the day. Now, they didn't specifically state that because they couldn't envision all of the technological development into the future. But the right to keep and bear arms of the day was kind of self-evident. And that's what we're here doing today. At this show, this wonderful gathering of people for all aspects of Second Amendment: hunting, marksmanship, target, recreation, and self-defense. There's law enforcement people here. There's military people here, both current and ex. You're going to tell them they don't have the right after serving their country? You're going to say they don't have the right to keep and bear arms anymore? They only had the right when the government gave them those arms and told them someone else was the enemy, go get them. But they don't have the right when they come back to their own country to defend themselves. You're going to take them away from them? I think that's sick, plain and simple. That's a crime, that's a violation of these rights, and it's sick. Why are they trying to do that? Why are they so desperately trying to take away your Second Amendment right? And you'll notice the Second Amendment wasn't written out that that's subject to manipulation by the legal profession. They didn't say that. They didn't say you can chew away on it piece by piece. The right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. That's it. End of story. No permits, no laws, nothing. That's it. That's it. That's what it says in the Bill of Rights. Nothing more. If we lose this, there will be no way to stop the absolute crushing of the population under the totalitarian agendas that have now occupied this country. Now, a little while ago, if I said that, a lot of people would have scratched their head and said, man, you're crazy, you know what you're talking about, you're this and you're that. But now they're beginning to see it very clearly. Because, take a look at the violent protests that have been happening all over this country in the last year. They're not prosecuting these people when they violate the rights and the property. They're letting them get away with violent crimes against the people. Well, what do you expect the people to do? Do you expect them to not defend themselves? The police often are doing nothing about it. The government's doing nothing about it. But what happens? They put the National Guard around the state capitol here in Washington State. They put the National Guard around many state capitals. They put the National Guard around Washington, D.C., which, by the way, is 10 square miles. 10 by 10 by 10. That's it. That was supposed to be the seat of the federal power. I'm going to repeat that. That was the seat of the federal power. It was supposed to be contained within that 10 square miles, and certain powers delegated to them, like creating armies, protecting our borders, creating forts and things like that. That's all spelled out in the Constitution. It didn't mean they had the right to overlay all these other laws and all these agendas onto the people everywhere under the guise of commerce, under the guise of protecting the public. That's become public policy that is often against our rights contained in the Bill of Rights and against the Constitution. But they've gotten away with it because the apparatus of government has been seized by those agendas laid out long ago, like I spoke about in the last podcast, going all the way back to the 18th century, even previous to the creation of this country. Again, I will repeat, the original delegates to the Constitutional Convention did not want to let a Bill of Rights be included. They wanted to create a system of ever-increasing usurping of power and rights of the people. But the people were ready to go into full rebellion and say, no, 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 we know how this is going to end up. We've been through this in Europe. We've seen this other places. Not here. That's not what we want. We demand it. Rights inalienable. 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 You can't take them away. They came from our Creator. They don't come from the government we have created. Now, if you talk to young people today, a very large percentage of them have no idea even what I'm talking about. No idea. They don't understand it because they've taken this out of the educational system. They don't want people to know of the power that was put in to this creation of self-governing system. You can't take these away. We created them, and they come from our Creator. We demand, by contract, that you stay away from this. You can't touch these. So what we have happening now in the attacks against the Second Amendment, just ask yourself, why are they trying to infringe upon it? Why are they trying to take it away? What is their intention? It's pretty obvious, isn't it? What can't you see about that? So that now, under this intentionally created public health pandemic, they want to force you into experimental, unsafe, untested medical device treatments. Because that's what they are. They don't want you to have the power to choose. They don't want you to have the power to educate yourself and speak out about what you know is going on. I've been under attack for speaking the truth about this. And I have decades of research into what I'm talking about here. And so do many of the greatest medical and science minds, as I said before. And they're trying to speak out, and they're trying to stop this medical genocide, and they're being attacked in every possible way. There have been some who have been assassinated. Their lives have ended. Others are being character assassinated. You smear their character. You attack their credential. You attack their path. You make up false claims of criminality against them to ruin their reputation. That's called character assassination. That's happening to these people greatly. Or you deplatform them. You take away their right, the First Amendment right, to free speech, so they can't communicate desperately to the people they love. I am doing this out of my love for my brothers and sisters and my children and my grandchildren. Why should that right be taken away from me? Why should the right to speak out what we know is happening with this medical genocide? And if you try to take that away from us more, and you keep putting the pressure to force this upon people who do not want it and will not take it, what do you think is going to happen? What is the inevitable consequence? So you better back off. And I don't have any problem saying it to you like that. You had better back off, because this is only going to end in a very ugly way. And we don't want that. But now, I don't know exactly the statistics at this point, 1/3 to 1/2 the adults population of America has now taken that experimental treatment. I'm telling you, they're very likely to die. And I don't have any problem saying it just like that. They are already dying in great number. They're already having injuries and sicknesses in great number. They are already showing positive and getting the symptoms of the pandemic that they were supposed to take this treatment to prevent. It's not preventing that at all. And the media is turning up the volume and lying to you day after day after day after day to program your mind to believe it's going to protect you. And the president, he's not really the president, he's a fake, fraudulent president, coming out saying, go get this treatment, go get this treatment, give it to your children. And by the way, they're coming after your children. And if you're not going to stand up and get serious about defense when they're coming after your children, what are you going to do it for? They start with the old people, then they move it down, younger, younger, younger. Children almost never got this illness. Almost never. And if they did, the effects were minimum. You would never even known it other than a common cold. Almost never have they died of it. Very, very small number. Why do you need to do this experimental, untested, unsafe treatment and device on children? Even in elderly people above 70 years old with comorbidities, 1%, only 1% fatality. Why are you now trying to force this on the children? Why are they doing this? I bet you the majority of people here know very clearly why they're doing this. But if you're not going to stand up and fight, yes, I'll use that word, if you're not going to stand up and fight for your children, then there is no future. I'm willing to stand up and fight for my children and my grandchildren, and that's why I'm doing this, and that's why my friend is doing this. He came to the enlightenment with what's going on. Well, if this is what's happening, nothing matters anymore. But then he realized, well, wait a minute. Now, everything matters, because this is the reality we're in, and we're not going to keep denying what's happening. I talk to people every day who are marching off the cliff to go take that treatment. I ask them why. They can't tell you a reason why. Well, the media says I should. The president says I should. The government says I should. The CDC says I should. I ask them, have you done the research on this? Do you understand the dangers of this? Do you understand the history of the pharmaceutical industry in creating these things? It's a horrible history. They've lied all the way. Robert F. Kennedy Jr., by the way, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., the son of Bobby Kennedy, is one of the most attacked people right now. He has a foundation called Children's Defense Fund. He's been deplatformed across the board. Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who, by the way, historically was a Democrat. And the Kennedys were Democrats, going all the way back to John F. Kennedy. They were in the Democratic Party. Ted Kennedy was the first main proponent of socialized medicine that would later come in under Obama as Obamacare. Why is he speaking out? Because he won his Supreme Court case that proved for 50 years the vaccine science is flawed. The vaccine testing is falsified. And now they're trying to force this upon you. Wake up, people. We have to find a way to break the hypnosis you're under. Go watch a stage hypnotist. I saw one the other day. He had a very intelligent grown lady, and he programmed her with hypnosis to not be able to count the number 7 in a list. She counted, she counted, she counted, she got to where 7 would be. She couldn't do it. Couldn't even count the number 7. That was a stage hypnotist that did this to her within minutes. She would go over and she couldn't say 7, and she would go to 11, and this is a grown, intelligent woman. Now you begin to understand how they're getting all these people to do this. And it starts with fear. It starts with that thing they want you to put over your mouth. It's a muzzle. It's an initiation. It's an occult initiation. It's designed to get you to acquiesce to the plan further down the road. You're marching step by step toward the forced agenda at the end of this by putting on the mask, because it does not protect you from anything. Nothing. So you're agreeing, you're complying. You've been made to feel this is to protect others. It's not protecting anybody, it's not protecting you. 65, I can show you 65 world-class studies that the masks do nothing to protect you and do many things to harm you, and do not put them on the children. I have no problem saying that. To put a mask on a child is child abuse. I would never do it, and it breaks my heart to see people doing this to their own children. Now I'm going to talk about oath keeping. All elected officials, all military, all judiciary, all law enforcement, all take an oath to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States of America against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Why did they include and domestic? Because they understand the nature of the game is to infiltrate within the system, put the enemies within, and bring it down. I'm going to read to you from the Oath Keepers organization. This is Stuart Rhodes, a wonderful man, wonderful patriot, military, ex-military, who has created the organization called the Oath Keeper. These are people who are very serious about the oath they took, and they understand what's going on. I'm going to read to you the list of the things they said they will not obey, the orders they will not obey that come down from government because it's a violation of their oath. So with each one, just know I'm prefacing it, we will not obey. We will not obey orders to disarm the American people or conduct warrantless searches without due process. We will not detain American citizens as unlawful enemy combatants or subject them to military tribunals. That's only if you're in the military, not citizens outside the military. Number 4, we will not obey orders to impose martial law or a state of emergency on any state. Look what they've done. They've created an artificial state of emergency under a public health crisis. If they get away with that, there'll be endless public health crises. Number 5, we will not obey any orders to invade and subjugate any state asserting its sovereignty from the federal. Number 6, we will not obey any orders to blockade American cities, turning them into giant concentration camps. Number 7, we will not obey any orders to force Americans into detention camp. That's FEMA camps, that's contact tracing camps, that's COVID camp, that's any of the above. Under any pretext. You hear that? Under any pretext. We will not obey any orders to assist foreign troops on U.S. soil against American citizens to keep the peace or maintain control. Number 9, we will not obey any orders to confiscate the property of the American people, including food. Food, people, we'll say it again, food. Essential supplies which infringe on the rights of free people. Essential supplies. That means Second Amendment tools and the supplies that go with them. Got that? Can't come and take them. They will not obey orders to come and take them. Number 10, we will not obey any orders which infringe on the rights of free speech to assemble and to petition the government for redress of grievances. What did they just do with the National Guard? What did they do with the National Guard in all these cities? They blocked us out. You know why? They're afraid. You know why they're afraid? Because they're breaking the law. They're violating our right. They're violating the Bill of Rights and the Constitution, and they have a very nefarious agenda they're trying to force on us. That's why they're trying to protect themselves. Isn't that obvious? Nancy Pelosi and everybody calling for the National Guard. because they're scared, because they know they have betrayed the American people in uncountable ways you may not know about yet, but we're going to talk about in future podcasts. So here we are at this wonderful show celebrating the Second Amendment and all the Bill of Rights. And I'm going to close out for today, and we're going to be coming back at you again. And these are designed to be a series that build on each other to show you the full scope of what's happening, because we are in a state of war, people. And I want you to be safe. I want you to be healthy. I want you to protect your children. And I want you to survive all this. We love you. God bless. That's all for now. Check out the Truth Arc, www.trutharc.org, and we welcome your support in any fashion. Bye.